Good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We all know about American money flowing into Chinese biolabs, which produce pandemics that kill millions around the world, and nobody's ever held accountable for it. But what about American biolabs where China has control? You ever think about that? Well, that's what's been happening in California. Here's the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. Yes, we are taking a closer look at the Chinese Communist Party. They're reporting a lab was found in California, and it has ties to China. Listen to this.
In December 2022, Code Enforcement Officer Jessalyn Harper noticed a green garden hose sticking out of the side of a warehouse in the small town of Reedley, California. The hose was a clear violation of the city's building code, so Officer Harper showed her badge and entered the warehouse. Inside the vast, dimly lit building, she found laboratory equipment, manufacturing devices, dangerous chemicals, and medical-grade freezers and containment units holding thousands of vials of biological substances. Some of these vials were unlabeled. Some were labeled in Mandarin. Others in a code that no one ever deciphered. Others were in English, with names of pathogens that Officer Parker did recognize, like HIV. The city also found approximately 1,000 transgenic mice used for research of human disease, which biolab workers told them were, quote, genetically engineered to catch and carry the COVID-19 virus.
So we have a Chinese mad science lab in California. What's happening here? Philip Lenczycki is an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller, specializes in China, specifically the Daily Caller News Foundation, its nonprofit sister organization. Philip, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay, but concerned. What is going on in California? We have Mandarin written all over the mad science lab.
This is really the most concerning story that I've personally seen this year. There's been just a ton of crazy things, obviously, but there's certain aspects to the story that really make it stand out. And so what had occurred was that in December 2022, as we just heard in that clip, this woman that we potentially owe our lives to, this code enforcement officer, Jessalyn Harper, she was in Reedley, California, small town, and she discovered a garden hose outside of this building that was improperly attached. After investigating this over the course of approximately April to June 2023, Reedley, California city officials had tried to bring in FBI and CDC, and all told, inside they found thousands and thousands of vials of apparently pathogens. They apparently identified 20 of them. Some of these were like dengue fever, HIV, and there was even, and this is, where we get into the mad science level, quote unquote, a freezer of Ebola. Now, Ebola is obviously this, extremely frightening disease. It was the basis for that movie in the 90s, Outbreak, and it apparently has a 25 to 90% lethality rate. So all of these diseases are there, and what the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party announced yesterday was that the individual who owned that facility in Reedley, he is tied to the Chinese government backed companies, as well as he's been a quote-unquote corporate officer for companies that are involved in China's military-civil fusion program, which is connected to the People's Liberation Army, and more or less is a way for companies to share their technology and perform certain duties for the Chinese military. This individual has stolen millions and millions of dollars of U.S. intellectual property in the past in different operations in Canada, from companies that cost him, his life there. And he had to come to the United States under an alias and live here illegally, somehow got a driver's license, of course, and then began to operate this facility there that was ostensibly to sell diagnostic kits for like pregnancy tests to the American public. He would bring in these tests from China and then mark them up and sell them to us. So there's a lot of questions left, beginning with why the FBI and CDC wouldn't help the city officials in Reedley look into this. and so on and so forth.
Wait, isn't that the whole point of the CDC? The Centers for Disease Control. So you have various vials marked with things like Ebola and HIV and COVID, and the CDC refused to investigate it?
That's correct. Apparently, the officials there were so concerned, they contacted, of course, the FBI. They refused outright to look into this, apparently.
It's insane.
And CDC apparently hung up the phone on the officials calling from Reedley mid-conversation until a local Democratic representative there, Jim Costa from California, somehow persuaded CDC to get their butts on the site. But there, apparently, after doing some type of cursory inspection, they determined that there was nothing to see, that all the evidence should be destroyed. So that's what occurred. And it was only after that the officials basically said, hey, CDC, there's a freezer of Ebola here that you did not list in your report. What's going on? So it was that sort of in reading it.
What explanation could there be, Philip?
Slapdash.
I'm sorry, Philip. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm trying to think. What explanation could there be beyond just rank corruption? This is insane to me, and I realize this is speculative, but when you have deadly pathogens inside of this shoddy little mad science lab in California, the Chinese government's fingerprints all over it, and the CDC has to be dragged in, kicking and screaming. They go in, they barely assess what's in there. They say destroy all of it, and then they skip the Ebola freezer. What does that tell you?
I don't know what to make of it. That's why this is so important and so absolutely terrifying to think that this could be in our backyard. What I can tell you from having looked into this, so we were one of the first outlets to pick up the story. I looked into this at the time in August and connected it, and our findings were confirmed yesterday in yesterday's report.
Yes.
That the company shared the same officers with folks back in China with a company called IDA there. But anyhow, the reason to say that is this is a sprawling operation, and it received, for instance, $360,000 in tax credits from Governor Gavin Newsom's Office of Business and Economic Development.
Of course.
So I don't know what the reason is why CDC wouldn't look into it, but it's possible that there are some political, considerations that they have not being embarrassed. I can't make heads or tails of it all, but what's clear, especially after this report, is that we need to figure this out.
Yes.
Because we also found in our investigation that there are additional locations. So this operation was both from the get-go we knew in Nevada and California, but having looked into it, there's other hubs. There was some footprint in New Jersey, in Colorado, in Canada. I spoke with Miss Ziba over there at the Reedley government over there, and she had told me that there was also some connections in, I believe, Louisiana. So there could be theoretically other offices or facilities like this across the United States.
Yes. California especially is kind of it's a wild west of all sorts of criminality, including, the cartels. We've talked about this before. Other Daily Call reporting on this subject. The cartels have set up full-blown grow operations for drugs, and they've been getting away with it. The cartels have a strong foothold in California, so this is just the latest craziness from that state. To reemphasize the point that you and I have been discussing, the FBI and the CDC not initially investigating any of this, despite the shocking evidence that they needed to. Here's the Select Committee laying that out.
Reedley City officials reached out to relevant law enforcement, public health, and regulatory officials about their shocking discovery. The FBI declined to investigate. The CDC refused to speak to them and, on multiple occasions, hung up on local officials mid-conversation. Finally, frustrated, city officials turned to Representative Jim Costa, their local member of Congress. With Representative Costa's help, Reedley officials finally got the CDC on site. Based solely on reading the labels, the CDC identified at least 20 potentially infectious agents, including many in risk group 2 and 3. Per the CDC, pathogens in risk group 3 are serious or lethal human diseases. Despite the admitted risks, the CDC refused to test the samples or examine the unlabeled vials containing what appeared to be pathogens or other biological samples.
I'm looking here. The reports include the agents that the infectious agents found by the CDC include SARS-CoV-2, that's coronavirus, COVID, chlamydia, HIV, E. coli, strep, hepatitis B and C, dengue virus, the rubella virus, and malaria. These were all found in one location in California. And so
That's right.
This is crazy. Is this the kind of thing that came up yesterday between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping? Did they discuss this at all that you're aware of?
It most certainly did not, if I had to put my money down on it.
Yeah, so they didn't. I mean, because if I was an American president and the Chinese government was sponsoring the like dangerous, reckless labs handling dangerous pathogens in the United States, that would be right near the top of the list, I think.
I would agree. There is no good explanation for this, as the Select Committee has pointed out. This business was, ostensibly to create and sell diagnostic kits for pregnancy tests and things of that nature. There's no reason why it should have a freezer of Ebola, period. So one is only left to wonder, what on earth could it possibly have been for?
Well, please keep digging on this subject, Philip Lenczycki. I know you will, and we'll take all the updates as we can get on it. Meanwhile, that meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden yesterday, what do you make of it? What were the kind of the broad outlines in your view?
Yeah, this is very concerning as well. I suppose I was going to say that, but we got some sense of what they wanted to discuss, and it seems now at this late hour, the APEC summit wraps up tomorrow, that really not too much was, solved or accomplished formally, at least. Apparently, for instance, just this afternoon, it was announced that they were unable to make any type of agreement on military usage of artificial intelligence, which, as I would want to say in a moment, might be, for the best. But anyhow, a lot of the things that they set out to do did not result in any type of quote unquote tangible results, as we might hear otherwise from legacy media outlets. The concerning thing, obviously, is that just for starters, we are, to use language from the left, we're platforming a genocidal dictator, and that might get some scrutiny here, but the way that plays in China and across the world, which is what we have to be mindful of, is that Xi Jinping is on an equal footing with the leader of the free world. We need to keep that in mind. That is something to cherish and to protect.
Yeah, and I just imagine what imagery he's bringing back with him. He's got the streets of San Francisco lined with Chinese communist flags to welcome him. And he arrives, he gets a hero's welcome, as I mentioned. All these world leaders want to meet with him. And then in particular, American CEOs were lining up to shake this guy's hand and talk to him yesterday. And in fact, gave him a standing ovation at a dinner last night in California. I was just imagining the absolute publicity coup that Xi Jinping was able to achieve and that he can bring back to, shore up his domestic support.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, it's very disgusting. It's disturbing what individuals and organizations showed up to that event last night. We had sort of a contingency, sort of the usual suspects from the investment world, Blackstone, BlackRock. We also had MasterCard. They sponsored what we called at the time the Genocide Games, which were the Winter Olympics in Beijing. There were also potentially, most concerning of all were several U.S. military contractors like Boeing and Honeywell. That should be looked into, obviously. One thing that I'll be honest, disappointed me was that, Elon Musk, he did not attend the dinner, but he attended the VIP reception beforehand.
Yes.
He looked, I'm not, an expert on body language, but he looked, uncomfortable to me.
I know.
I'm not trying to.
I agree.
For him,
I saw some of the video of him. He did look uncomfortable. Like he wasn't sure exactly how to. There was a Chinese reporter trying to throw some questions at him, and he answered them in a very terse way. Because look, the reality here with Elon Musk is he's very dependent on China for his supply chain at the moment because of all that battery technology. And this has always been the issue I've had with Elon. Like, and look, nobody's going to be perfect. Let's be honest. But and he's been great on free speech on Twitter, now X. But my concern that's always kind of been there is how's he going to do on China, and what kind of pressure can he withstand if China brings it to bear?
That's exactly right, and I feel the same way. I would love to be a fly on the wall next time, he has a conversation in private with, a Joe Rogan or whoever, and they can really hash that out, because I feel I want to believe that, as you mentioned, that, he is this, free speech advocate, and he does, share these values, and that this is something he's trying to disentangle himself from. We definitely see, Apple, for instance. So Tim Cook was there last night. We know Apple's got Foxconn, their plant producing everything in China. So they're kind of in the same boat. Tesla's got Gigafactory in Shanghai. Maybe they're just, okay, I need to get out of there, but until then, I just have to play nice.
Yeah.
For instance, there's this guy, Robert Goldstein, there from Las Vegas Sands. Sands has now got a casino in Macau. So maybe that's the same game that's going on there. I'm not sure. Then you've got others like Amway, and Amway, their largest market now since I think like 2006 or something like that has been China. I mean, they're toast. Their fate is totally linked with China apparently. So it's difficult to say, but I'd hope that Elon is saying to himself, I got to get out of there. This is not who I am. I'm better than this.
Interesting. All right, well, we'll keep our eyes open. Philip Lenczycki, thank you as always. Really appreciate your insight on all these very important topics. Thank you, Philip. Bob is calling in from Jacksonville, Florida. Bob, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call. In 2014, Congress gave millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to prepare for the Ebola outbreak that was occurring in West Africa.
Yeah.
I happen to work at Holy Cross Hospital for 4 years, teaching the staff how to be ready for that patient that presents with Ebola. 4 years later, thank God, no patients did. However, we were ready for COVID. Ebola, the movie is an understatement. Realizing after your last interview that exists alive in our country is terrifying.
It is. It sounds like it. And Bob, I'm glad your expertise is valuable here. I will say one of the amazing features of this story, there's so many amazing features, but they identified and confirmed all these other things, COVID, chlamydia, HIV. But when it came to the freezer that was labeled Ebola, they say that the local officials reported that they found the freezer with the label that said Ebola. They notified the CDC. The agency responded by saying they don't recall seeing the Ebola label. The fridge and the contents within it were destroyed without being tested, according to the report. Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard? Maybe not. We've heard a lot of crazy things, but that's up there. That's one of them. This is a huge story. Deserves a lot more attention. Obviously, we're giving it here, and we'll stay on it, and we'll find out what else develops from it. It is 5:29. That was funny. My brother just FaceTimed me. We were like 5 seconds from air. I was like, hey, dude, I'm on the air. He's like, oops, sorry, forgot about that. Why aren't you listening to the show? His kid's dressed up as a turkey, though, so that was kind of funny. Ready for Thanksgiving. I hope you have great Thanksgiving plans ahead. I have plans for you to tell you about. Tomorrow I'll be hosting the Dan Bongino Show, and then subsequently, this might not come as a surprise, the Vince Coglianese Show right here on WMAL. So we've got a lot to discuss tomorrow. Hey, you can join us on this program at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I decided, a couple things are happening here at the station, and you have to know about them. Don't worry, nothing crazy. In fact, everything's always getting better and better and better. The producer of this program and also the guy who answers all of your wonderful phone calls is Corey Inganamort. Corey is, sort of the engine behind this show. He writes all my scripts. Every word that comes out of my mouth is written by Corey. It's all teleprompter. I am the Joe Biden of this program. Now, Corey is a great producer, and this weekend on Saturday, he'll be hosting an hour right here on WMAL. So if you enjoy this program, you're really going to enjoy Corey Inganamort, 4 o'clock on Saturday, and so I pulled Corey into the air studio here. Corey, you ready, man? 4 o'clock Saturday?
I am pumped. I am fired up, ready to do this.
It's going to be great. It's going to be really great. All right, well, let's go through some topics here because I know I want to talk to you about Major League Baseball here in a moment because I know you are a guy you're an alum of the Major League Baseball experience. You were with the Washington Nationals for many years, not as a player. You were the mascot of the Nationals.
I wore 00. That was my number. Yes.
That was your number, 00.
Yes. Matter of fact, real quick story. My grandfather, when I told him I was going to be the mascot for the Washington Nationals, he was a bit confused. He said, "Wait, you're going to be a mascot?" So when I go hang out with a bunch of people and they say, "Oh, that's my son, number 10. That's my son, number 3." What am I supposed to say? That's my son, the chicken? I said, well, no, Pop. I'm an eagle, actually. And I hope you're proud of me.
What am I supposed to say?
He came around to it a little bit.
It's my grandson, the chicken?
Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny.
So, yeah, I did, as we've discussed on the show previously, I worked for the Washington Nationals for 13 years. I was their mascot, Screech. So I wore an eagle costume. I have some really great experiences, some interesting experiences where I get to ride the elevator, walk the tunnels. I overhear some underground workings of MLB, how people are leaning, what people are thinking. And a story popped up today that angered me. It angered me. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of MLB, announced that Atlanta will be hosting the 2025 All-Star Game.
I'm pleased to announce that the Executive Council has approved the Atlanta Braves as the hosts of the 2025 All-Star Game and the surrounding events.
Okay, so why would that anger you, that Atlanta was chosen for the All-Star Game? Why does someone get upset about that?
Because Atlanta was chosen to host the 2021 All-Star Game. They were supposed to host it, but commissioner of MLB said, no, we're going to fall to the political pressure that we're feeling from the left. Because if you remember at the time, Brian Kemp in Georgia instituted some laws, some really basic laws, like you need to show ID to vote in this state. And of course, the racist left was like, oh my God, how can you expect African-American people to vote with an ID? They said, no, this is a racist law. We can't do that here. So there was so much pressure from the left, from everybody involved up at the top of MLB that said, you can't host this. And he fell to the pressure. He said, we're going to cancel the All-Star Game in Atlanta. And we'll revisit it at another time.
Right. They moved it. They gave it to Colorado, right?
They gave it to Colorado. And I told this story before, but when they did that, I was asked to, I was all set to go to Atlanta that year, work it as Screech. Every year MLB brings out mascots. There's 27 of us. There was one mascot that decided, no, I'm not going to go to Colorado because I think it's a bunch of crap that you've canceled Atlanta's All-Star Game.
Who was that?
Who was what?
What mascot was that?
Well, Vince, it was Screech, the mascot of the Washington Nationals. That was me that made that decision.
So if we go back to the footage, the only mascot not to appear at that, what year was that?
2021.
2021 All-Star Game. That was Screech from the Washington Nationals, Corey Inganamort, because he was like, this is ridiculous. Why would you take the All-Star Game away from Atlanta? And history, of course, has proven you completely correct on every front because, what happened after they imposed the voter integrity law in Georgia? The election was perfectly fine. Yeah, in fact, turnout went up. No black voter was prevented from voting whatsoever. In fact, if that person even existed, the media would have made that person so famous you would know their name reflexively. That never happened. And the only person at least in Major League Baseball, who seemed to recognize this was Screech the Eagle at the Washington Nationals. So you sat it out. You said, I'm not going.
I sat it out. I told my bosses, I'm not interested in doing this. I'm not going to support MLB's decision. And I wasn't allowed to speak to media at the time. I was hush-hushed. I told some friends, but that story never got out there. And I used to run the Screech Twitter account. And I got a bunch of messages. Oh, where are you? We're here in Colorado. We're looking for you. And of course, I couldn't respond. MLB got too political for me, so I decided to boycott. I couldn't say that. But come full circle, Atlanta is hosting in 2025.
Yeah.
And the obvious question is, well, why Rob Manfred? What changed?
And Rob Manfred was the commissioner back in 2021. In fact, here's some audio of him. Is this in response to a question, or did he just volunteer this?
He volunteered it. It's a real, he kind of sidestepped the issue. He knew it was controversial, but he really didn't want to discuss it. So this is what he said.
I've said it before. We wanted to bring an all-star game back to Atlanta. I made a decision in 2021 to move the event, and I understand, believe me, that people had then and probably still have different views as to the merits of that decision.
Barf.
What's most important is that the Atlanta Braves are a great organization. Truist Park and the Battery are gems.
Okay, what a clown.
Thank you, Rob Manfred. That's so nice. All is forgiven.
You know, one of the many ironies buried in this story are that by removing the All-Star game from Atlanta, a majority black city, they hurt the economic prospects of Atlanta, which would have been the beneficiary of having the All-Star game, and all the local businesses would have been able to net some revenue from that. And then they gave it to Colorado in I think a majority white city. The whole thing, none of it made any sense. And the idea was, we're standing up for black people by making sure they don't get money. What is that about?
It's unbelievable. And after every All-Star game, the MLB does an economic report for the city that they just hosted it in. I looked up some numbers. When Washington, D.C. hosted the All-Star game in 2018, it brought 2018. It brought $68 million to the city. When the next year Cleveland hosted it brought $65 million to the city. LA hosted it the next year, $89 million to the city. And so this was in 2021. People are struggling already because of the government shutdowns after COVID. These small businesses are barely surviving. They were relying on this influx of money coming to their city. And a couple months before it was supposed to happen, Rob Manfred said no. So during this press conference, he barely addressed the issue. And then he took a few questions. He took 8 questions. Today. And the main story in baseball today is that the Oakland A's are moving to Las Vegas in 2028. So he took 8 questions. Every one of them had to deal with the move to Las Vegas. And I was I was so angered. Here's your one chance. He never actually really addressed this issue. And if I was asking the questions, I'd be like, hey, Rob Manfred, what changed? Did the laws suddenly not become racist? And if they are still racist, why are you hosting this?
It's too much. Sports media, not everybody. We know people who are good. But sports media is embarrassing.
It's awful.
It's like there's too much cowardice, and everyone, I can't ask that question. So nobody wants to ask anything interesting. They're all asking about the A's moving to Vegas. Come on, that's.
And there's never any accountability. He just briefly mentions it. Yeah, we're bringing it back, and we hope all is forgotten. It's the same thing that happens all the time in sports and in media. There's no accountability for COVID and all the lockdowns. There's no accountability for Russiagate. No one goes back and reflects and say, you know what, we were wrong. And what I would love to have heard him say, hey, Atlanta, I'm sorry. I would love to, those 2 words, I'm sorry. Never got out of his mouth.
Never out of his mouth. Well, the die was cast on this. I mean, the left went all in on this idea that Georgia was making its laws racist, even though, of course, the laws made the voting have more integrity, which was good. It required voter ID in every form of voting you possibly could do. And it resulted in fewer people having their votes rejected because of their stupid signature matching system where you're relying on election workers to stare at a signature on file and a signature on a ballot and go, yeah, those match, or no, they don't match. And then you're like, wait, who are you to do to render a judgment like that? For what it's worth, my signature when I was 18 years old does not look like the signature that I have now. At all. If I put those side by side, you'd be like, this guy is a phony. He's a total fraud.
It's racist to think that black people don't have IDs to vote to begin with.
Yeah.
Like how is this going to suppress the black vote because they have to show IDs when they vote? That's the racist perspective.
Here's how Joe Biden described it. Remember this?
Will you stand for democracy? Yes or no? And here's one thing every senator, every American should remember. History has never been kind to those who've sided with voter suppression over voters' rights.
Well, then why does the Democrat Party still exist?
And it'll even be less kind for those who side with election subversion. So I ask every
Well, then why does the Democrat Party still exist? I find myself repeating that.
Elected official in America, how do you want to be remembered? At consequential moments in history, they present a choice. Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace?
Well, George Wallace was the Democrat.
Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bull Connor?
They're both Democrats.
Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis?
Abe Lincoln, the Republican, Jefferson Davis, the Democrat. So this is Biden. And so he said that, look, if you support voter integrity laws in Georgia, you are Bull Connor. You're Jefferson Davis. That's who you are. George Wallace. And that guy's a lunatic. But that's the way they were talking. And so MLB, they played right into this. They went right along with it, and they stripped Atlanta the opportunity to make the money in the first place.
Yeah, and Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, kept fighting back about it. Prove that these laws are going to restrict the voting. He chimed in today on Twitter. Brian Kemp said, Georgia's voting laws haven't changed, but it's good to see the MLB's misguided understanding of them has. We look forward to welcoming the All-Star game to Georgia. Go Braves.
Yeah.
It shows a little bit of restraint, in my opinion. I would have liked to have gone torched earth on MLB and Rob Manfred, but Brian Kemp's a better man.
You know, it'd be funny to whip up a bunch of lefties to protest the All-Star game in Atlanta now. Just be like, the voting laws are racist here in Atlanta. Just, we'll see. But that's probably not going to happen because, whoever's pulling the strings on all these particular protests is not going to snap their fingers and make that happen anymore this time. But boy, it's definitely happening. All right, so that's a wild story, and good for you for rubbing it in their face that they just straight up are hoping to dance past their lies about Atlanta in the first place. I'm going to play some other audio here. Stick around, Corey. This is Vivek Ramaswamy, the presidential candidate, was on CNN last night, and he was on with the host is named Abby Phillip, and she is trying to say that Donald Trump is a big old authoritarian, fascist, threat to America, threat to democracy, the normal line over at CNN. And so listen to how Vivek handles a line of questioning from Abby Phillip. And I'll just tell you ahead of time, masterfully.
That language, they live like vermin. Do you believe that is, as your Republican colleague Chris Christie has said, neo-Nazi rhetoric?
This is a classic mainstream media move. Pick some individual phrase of Donald Trump, focus on literally that word without actually interrogating the substance of what's at issue.
The word was chosen for a reason.
We are in the middle of a cultural war in this country.
The word was chosen for a reason.
It's actually describing a series of behaviors. You have Antifa and other related groups that have been burning down cities for the last 3 years in this country.
Would you describe them as vermin?
Wildly violating the rule of law. We have an invasion on our southern border. We have millions of people crossing our southern border. Let's talk about the substance of why we have to recognize that we're not in ordinary times.
Would you use that language yourself?
The vocabulary of the vermin or not is not what's important. Well, I haven't used that language. So you can look at my track record on the campaign trail. I talk about the issues. We all talk about them differently. But what I'm not going to do is play some game of focusing on some word that somebody else said without ignoring entirely the substance of what we're actually talking about. A border crisis of historic proportion. Economic stagnation we haven't seen in 50 years. A national identity crisis and a loss of national pride in the next generation that's potentially existential for this country. Let's talk about our dependence on China. Today we're actually talking about Xi Jinping, picking on Donald Trump's word vermin to talk about that status quo. You know what's vermin? What's running around San Francisco on a given day before Gavin Newsom cleaned it up on a dime to roll out the red carpet for Xi Jinping. If he could do that for Xi Jinping, he could have done it on an ordinary day, and yet we're here sitting talking not about the substance of that, but on one word that Donald Trump said in some speech in Miami. This is what's wrong with the mainstream media. Focus on the substance and let's have an actual policy debate rather than talking to a presidential candidate instead of the policy substance of what's actually going on in the country, picking on some word that Donald Trump said on a certain day and asking me for comment on it. Give me a break.
Give me a break. I mean, look, that guy... First of all, he's got a lot of talent, and it's only grown throughout this presidential campaign. I know people have picked on him. I've heard from people like, oh, he's repeated lines that he read from Barack Obama from back in the day. I wouldn't be surprised if he has actually integrated some Obama lines, but I guarantee you, I don't know him that well, but I guarantee you he's literally just using this because he sees Obama's ability to communicate, and he's trying to ape some of it as he pursues this career in politics. No question. And God, the guy just runs circles around these people. He's dominant.
He's so good. And what you don't see Abby Phillip do is ask members of Congress from the left would they agree with Rashida Tlaib's comments. Hey, do you support her from the river to the sea comments? It's always, hey, Republicans, what do you think about this off-the-wall comment that another Republican made? The standards are different. And personally, like, you can tell she's trying to compare Donald Trump to Nazi Germany. But, you know, I think the party that tries to disarm you, the party that tries to censor you on Twitter or groom your children or open our borders, I think that's the party that closer resembles that ideology. And Not Vivek Ramaswamy. What are we talking about here?
Abby Phillip is like a defender of totalitarianism, not the critic of it. It's
the two-tier justice system. I mean, if we're talking about Nazi Germany, let's compare the policies of the parties.
It's crazy.
Not Vivek Ramaswamy.
Well, look, you want to hear more from Corey? You can hear more from Corey. Corey Inganamort is going to be hosting WMAL 4 o'clock this Saturday. Please tune in to hear Corey there. It is. Biden's at it again. He says Americans are too stupid to realize how great the economy is.
I acknowledge there's a disconnect between the numbers and how people feel about their place in the world right now. We can deal with the second part as well.
Yeah, we're going to beat in India. You're going to love this economy once we get a hold of you. So crazy. Hey, you know what's not crazy? The great one. He's up next. Mark Levin right here on the legendary WMAL.